Thank you, Mr Speaker, for the opportunity to address the House. As this is my first speech as a parliamentarian, I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. It is a great honour and privilege for me to stand here today to address the House on behalf of the people of the Melton electorate. As some of you would be aware, I was a very late entrant as the ALP candidate, and when the proposal was put to me that I stand as the candidate for Melton, I was greatly humbled and honoured, if not a little shell-shocked, with only 3.5 weeks before the election. My decision was required fairly quickly, to say the least. Nevertheless, it was undoubtedly one of the biggest decisions I had to make in my life. Luckily, I had the night to think it over. The following morning, still contemplating my decision, I asked my wife her thoughts, and without hesitation, we both agreed this was the direction for the next chapter of our lives. To be elected in what was a very short and tough campaign was very sobering. There were 11 other candidates and they all ran strong campaigns, but in the end, Labor won the day. I'm very grateful for the support given to me personally from the Melton constituents, and I would like to thank them wholeheartedly for their continued support for the Andrews Labor government. There is a great weight of expectation upon my shoulders, and I am committed to work tirelessly and to do my utmost to fulfil those expectations. I wish to acknowledge the lengthy service of the previous member, Don Nadella, and wish him well in his retirement. I have a working class background, being born and bred in Braybrook in the western suburbs. There were 6 children in our family, my twin brother and I being the youngest. My mother was a cleaner at a bank in the city. My father was a motor mechanic at General Motors Holden for over 30 years, and prior to that, he served in the Royal Navy. Our parents brought us up to be independent and capable from an early age. Our family was instilled with trade union and labour values. My mother always made sure that all of her children would look out for and support others, with the belief that you achieve better outcomes when you work with and support people collectively. My brothers and sisters and I were heavily involved in sport, particularly footy for my brothers and I, and netball for my sisters, which we all started playing at Maidstone Primary School and in the streets near where we lived. Sport was a huge part of our lives in those days and still is today. I've always been extremely active in my local sporting communities. Unfortunately, our childhood was abruptly interrupted when our mother suffered a stroke and passed away at 48 in 1973. In those days, the doctor was required to authorise an ambulance to take a patient to hospital. Unfortunately, the treating doctor misdiagnosed my mother and told her she had a strained muscle in her arm. Despite the doctor's misdiagnosis, my mother knew she was dying, and while she was still able, she called us all in to say our goodbyes. She slipped into a coma and was taken to hospital by ambulance later that night and died in hospital. Thankfully, our health system has come a long way since then. In my early working life, I worked as an orderly at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. Seeing paramedics coming into casualty whilst undertaking their role really inspired me, and I commenced training as a paramedic in Melbourne in February 1981. I undertook my training in Sunshine and worked a lot in the western suburbs over a period of 15 years, serving the communities of Melton, Bacchus Marsh, Sunshine and St Albans. Additionally, I undertook roles at Air Ambulance and the Rosters Department. It was a fantastic job. I liked the shift work and the camaraderie. Every day was different and there was never a dull day. In terms of moments that stood out for me in the job, dealing with the deaths of children was difficult. In the 80s, there seemed to be a lot of cot deaths, SIDS cases. Sadly, around that time, I attended the deaths of 2 young boys, aged 7 and 8, who were hit by a train. There was a triple fatality in which all 3 adults were dead when we arrived at the scene. You always remember those cases. On the other side, there were memorable highlights. People say delivering babies is a highlight, and it most certainly is. But for me, I found bringing a patient back to life was my greatest highlight. Basically, the role of an ambulance paramedic was all about helping people, seeing the relief on people's faces when you walk into their house. You put your hand on their shoulder and straight away you see them ease. Just attending and being able to comfort people was wonderful. The ambulance profession has changed immensely since my days on the road. The hours worked, the new technology, knowledge paramedics need to have, changes in medical practice, the range of drugs utilised, and the constant scrutiny they are all under make it a lot harder. I would say the lifespan for paramedics in the job when I started was 30 years. Now it's probably 10 years due to the incumbent pressures and workload they have to contend with. From 1993 to 1995, I held the position of shop steward across metropolitan Melbourne. I always tried to support and look after my colleagues. At the end of 1995, I joined the Ambulance Union as the Assistant Secretary. And in 2005, I was elected to the position of General Secretary, a position I held for 13 years before retiring in July of 2018. Thanks, Premier. And I won't mention the caravan, all right? In 2008, I was elected to the position of President of the National Council of Ambulance Unions and served its 15,000 members for 10 years. During this tenure, I championed a number of key issues, including preventing the privatisation of the ambulance services, addressing occupational violence against paramedics, the introduction of national paramedic registration, supporting the mental health of paramedics by mainstreaming mental health as a core OH&S issue. These are issues that the Andrews Labor government have strongly supported. During the period of 2012-2014 under my union leadership, the Code Red campaign to end the crisis in the Victorian Ambulance Service was the single largest union campaign in the lead up to the 2014 state election. You may remember it because every Victorian ambulance had written messages on their windows to inform the public of the crisis. I worked with the then incoming Andrews government to ensure the members under my care received the working conditions they deserved and Victorians were provided with a vastly improved ambulance service. The seat of Melton is one of the most dynamic and rapidly growing areas in Australia, encompassing Bacchus Marsh, Brookfield, Darley, Exford, Hopeton Park, Long Forest, Melton, Melton South and Merrimew, and parts of Amesbury, Kurrajong, Mattingley, Melton West and Parwin. The two most significant population hubs are the towns of Melton and Bacchus Marsh. In the city of Melton, 7,000 residents move in every year. It is predicted that by 2031 there will be more than 250,000 residents living in Melton. Comparatively, in the same electorate, the population of Bacchus Marsh, including Darley and Mattingley, is estimated at over 22,000. Bacchus Marsh faces unique challenges of its own, including dated infrastructure and facilities, together with ever-increasing traffic congestion. The demographics have changed over time. Now the median age of Melton and Bacchus Marsh is 39 and 43 respectively. The youth population of Melton is 26% and 19% in Bacchus Marsh. As the member for Melton, I will strongly advocate for investment in schools and hospitals, local jobs, skills and training, improved public transport, road and rail services, infrastructure and community services. These are the fundamental needs and rights of our society, and I will work tirelessly as part of the Andrews Labor government to ensure that we achieve positive and constructive outcomes. A significant issue in Bacchus Marsh is the need for road upgrades to cater for the increase in traffic and road congestion. Many residents raised this concern with me during the election, and I have seen firsthand the need for improvements in this area. The most significant issue in Melton is the provision of a public hospital. The Melton electorate does not have a hospital and requires a healthcare facility which can offer 24-hour emergency assistance. In October 2018, the Honourable Jill Hennessy, the then Minister for Health, announced the provision of $2.3 million to start planning for a public hospital in Melton. And I am fully committed to seeing this facility become a reality for my electorate. Given the issues facing the Melton electorate, I have my work cut out for me. However, I'm confident in the knowledge that the only government that is capable and committed to work towards solving these issues is a Labor government. A poignant example of the Andrews Labor government resolving issues in this electorate evolved out of the tragic death of two young men who died during our ambulance crisis in 2013 under the previous Liberal National government. These young men were 18-year-old Brodie Wilson, who passed away on the 29th of June 2013, and 23-year-old Matthew Gibbs, who passed away on the 9th of October 2013. These young men tragically did not have an ambulance arrive in an acceptable time, and unfortunately, they were unable to be resuscitated. It is the legacy of these two young men that when the Andrews government came into office in 2014, that much work was done collectively to rectify ambulance response times so that a tragedy such as this would never happen again, not only in Melton, but across the state. I would like to acknowledge the campaigning of the parents of these young men, Steve and Joe Gibbs and Julie Wilson, and I believe Julie's in the gallery tonight. Along with Steve, Joe and Julie, I would also like to thank all the paramedics. Danny Hill, General Secretary, and Olga Bartasek, Assistant Secretary of Ambulance Employees Australia, Victoria. The previous member for Williamstown, Wade Noonan. Ambulance Victoria Chief Executive Officer, Tony Walker. The Premier, and of course, the Honourable Jill Hennessy, the previous Minister for Ambulance, for her tireless efforts over a 4-year timeframe, resulting in drastically improved ambulance services across the state, and in particular within the Melton electorate. The legacy of Matthew Gibbs and Brodie Wilson has improved ambulance resourcing levels throughout the Melton electorate dramatically. Response times have improved by 3 minutes in Melton and 4 minutes in Bacchus Marsh. This has resulted in better health outcomes and reduced loss of life, not only in Melton, but across the state. We owe much to Brodie and Matthew and the Gibbs and Wilson families. On a personal note, my wife Janet and I have one daughter, Vivian, who is married to Peter, and we have 2 grandchildren, Thomas and Sarah. Sarah commenced her VCE studies this year, and Thomas just had his marching out parade at Kapooka Army Base in Wagga on the 8th of February. We are very proud of our family, their values and their achievements. I have many people to thank for me being where I am today. Firstly, my parents, James and Florence. If they were here today, I know they would be proud. My brothers and sisters, who are probably thinking, just get on with it. And my fantastic colleagues and Ambulance Employees Australia, Victoria. A big thank you go out to all the paramedics I've worked with over 38 years, both as colleagues and members. You are an amazing group of people. To my campaign team, in particular, Broden Borg and Nathan Miles, thank you for your support and tireless efforts during my hectic 3.5-week campaign. And of course, all the countless volunteers that helped out. My appreciation is also extended to the Labor Party branch members in Melton and Bacchus Marsh for their support. To all the community organisations that I met with during my campaign, including the Melton South Football Netball Club, Friends of Toolan Creek, Darley Football Netball Club, the Kirrup Aboriginal Organisation, Friends of Melton Botanic Gardens, Melton Secondary College, Melton West Primary School, Exford Primary School, Staunton College, thank you for your incredible welcome and support. Finally, to my wife Janet, I cannot thank you enough. I believe that only the Andrews Labor government, with its progressive policies, foresight and commitment, can deliver for all Victorians. This is why I am a proud Labor member and even prouder member for Melton in the 59th State Parliament. I want to leave this post knowing that I was able to contribute to the Andrews Labor government in making the lives of all Victorians better. I thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the House.